Good evening and welcome to Northbeat. I'm Lainey Lambrink. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made an explosive allegation yesterday in the House of Commons. He said Canadian security officials say there are credible links between the government of India and the killing of a Canadian Sikh leader in British Columbia. Now, this story means a bit more to the North than you might think, and we're going to come back to that. But first, CBC's Marina von Stackelberg is going to bring us the latest.
The Prime Minister says Canada will make sure those responsible for the murder of a Sikh Canadian will be held to account.
India, the government of India, needs to take this matter with the utmost seriousness. We are doing that. We are not looking to provoke or escalate. We are simply laying out the facts as we understand them.
Trudeau says intelligence officials have credible evidence linking agents of the Indian government to the murder of Canadian citizen Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He was shot to death outside this Surrey Gurdwara in June. Nijjar was an outspoken critic of India's government and supported an independent Sikh state.
Hardeep Singh Nijjar had publicly mentioned the threat to his life for months.
National Muslim and Sikh organizations say they are not surprised the killing is being linked to India's government. They say it was only a matter of time before something like this happened on Canadian soil.
And there are a number of Canadian Sikhs that have been identified as having a threat to their life, and we are asking for the government of Canada to provide protection for these Sikhs in Canada.
I mean, in Canada, if you cannot have an opinion about another foreign government without having to worry about walking outside and worrying is there going to be a foreign agent that's going to gun you down in the streets, what's going on?
India's government denies any involvement in the shooting. The NDP want the public inquiry into foreign interference to investigate India's actions in Canada's affairs.
Given these allegations, there's no doubt now that India should be included in the public inquiry and that any and all forms of interference need to be investigated thoroughly.
Canada's allies are calling for a thorough investigation with the Indian government's full cooperation. Still, the United Kingdom and the United States both said today they will continue trade talks with India despite Canada's allegations. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Yukon's premier has found himself in the middle of this diplomatic firestorm. Ranj Pillai has been on a trade mission to India to try and sell the territory's critical minerals. Catherine Pilkington has the story.
Trudeau's allegations may be the latest twist in the bumpy relationship between India and Canada, but Yukon opposition leader Curry Dixon said tensions have been rising for weeks. He's questioning why the territory's trade mission went ahead at all. A week before Pillai arrived in India, Trudeau raised concerns about the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar with Prime Minister Modi at the G20 summit. That discussion also came after Canada formally paused trade talks with India at the beginning of September. Pillai is currently in India to discuss the export of rare minerals from Yukon mines. In his last post on social media on September 18th, he writes that he met with leaders in New Delhi to discuss trade, tourism opportunities, and the possible recruitment of Indian healthcare workers. His cabinet communication said delegates have been in constant communication with the Canadian Embassy in India throughout the trip and have been in touch with the Prime Minister's office. They describe Pillai's Asia mission as a success and say that it has created valuable business connections and opportunities for the Yukon's mining sector. Dixon says it doesn't make sense to have spent taxpayer dollars on a 7-day trip to India weeks after the federal government suspended trade talks with the Indian government. Pillai is expected back in the Yukon on the 21st. Catherine Pilkington, CBC News, Whitehorse.
The government of Nunavut will be tabling a strategic plan next year. It's a response to the Auditor General of Canada's scathing report about the Department of Family Services. Officials from both the Auditor General and the GN testified to a Nunavut Legislative Committee today. The CBC's Emily Hawes has more.
Family Services Deputy Minister Jonathan Ellsworth says NTI and its 3 regional organizations will be involved in the plan's development.
Initial strategic plan to be developed hopefully before the end of fall. So we would have something tabled in this House for review in the winter sitting.
Ellsworth was one of several officials answering questions about the Auditor General report into family services. Among other findings, it said that the territory inadequately responded to reports of suspected harm.
It has to have an evaluation framework. It needs to be measurable. We need to be able to measure whether or not the steps we are taking to address these issues are actually making positive change.
MLA Janet Pitzelak-Brewster has personally dealt with the foster care system. She said during Tuesday's lunch break that the timeline concerns her because she's not clear what's happening to address the needs of children who are in crisis today.
We can't wait. They can't wait, and they shouldn't have to wait to be supported and to be brought into a safer place in their lives.
She says that while she is somewhat confident that the plan will fix the problem, there are many barriers to success, including staffing challenges. She said she would reserve judgment until she's been able to question officials more. Committee hearings on the report will continue tomorrow. Emily Hawes, CBC News, Iqaluit.
More and more people going back to the South Slave region of the Northwest Territories today. The evacuation orders for Hay River, Catlow-Deche First Nation and Fort Smith are over, but it's a bittersweet homecoming. The land and the forests are not what they used to be. Wildfire scars are everywhere. Structures have been lost, homes burnt to the ground. And yet there's hope and deep gratitude for those who put their lives on the line to save as much as they could. Carla Ulrich has the story.
It's day 2 of the return here in Fort Smith, and businesses are slowly opening up. People are smiling, happy to be home, and thankful for those who stepped up to save this community.
We had young people, we had older people, we have all kinds of staff that came in from different parts of Canada and the United States or wherever. You know, we're just so grateful that our community is still intact because we're in the middle of a forest, you know.
And, you know, we're very grateful to the first responders and the people who looked after us during this time. What they've done was tremendous.
While the evacuation order is over here in Fort Smith, an alert remains in place, and the massive fire that forced everyone out last month is still out of control.
Well, the fire is still out there. It's still burning. We have 149 kilometers of perimeter that is been determined to be intolerable to fire spread. We've contained about 93% of that. So great progress, but there's still quite a bit of work to do.
Those heroic firefighters still going. No plans to stop anytime soon. Fire suppression every day until the threat is over. And while that work continues, people returning to Smith are asked to let crews do their work and stay out of closed areas. Carla Ulrich, CBC News, Fort Smith.
Now that most evacuation orders in the NWT have lifted, the territorial government is turning its thoughts to the future and what it can learn from the past.
I want to be clear that the GNWT is committed to an after-action review once this historic wildfire season is behind us. We will use this opportunity to identify what works for us this summer and where we can make improvements going forward. We will invite feedback from all NWT residents as part of this process so that your experience are taken into consideration.
Thompson says there's no sugarcoating it. The budget for this year's wildfire season has ballooned. It's now 4 times larger than it was at the start of the year. Some Fort Simpson residents have gone weeks without being able to take out cash. It's because the village's only bank has been closed. Unless people use online banking, it means they don't have access to their money. Luke Carroll has more.
The CIBC in Fort Simpson has been closed for about 2 weeks now. Sean Welly is the mayor of Fort Simpson.
But it's down to the point where none of the local ATMs have money in them, and the bank's ATM is not functioning. So really, there's just literally no cash, and it's really hurting people who don't have online banking.
This includes elders in the community. Welly says he's heard of many who can't even purchase their own food. This also isn't the first closure of the summer.
You know, if that had been just a one-off situation due to staffing or what have you, I mean, it would be perhaps understandable, but We've had intermittent closures all during the summer, and now we've got this 2-week period of time.
After speaking with CBC News, Welly posted on Facebook that the bank would be reopening tomorrow. A CIBC spokesperson said in an email that they would be resupplying the ATMs in the coming days. The spokesperson did not say what caused the closure, just that it occurred during the unprecedented wildfire season. Luke Carroll, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Okay, let's talk about this rather blurry image beside me. It's a type of algae found in Great Slave Lake. It's tiny. This photo was snapped with the help of a microscope, but it could have big consequences. A new study being published this evening in a Royal Society journal says this kind of algae is dominant in Great Slave Lake now, and it wasn't before. The change happened quickly. Researchers say it's going to have a ripple effect up the food web in Great Slave Lake all the way to the fish. I spoke to 2 biologists who weren't involved in the study, and they spoke highly of the authors who wrote it, saying the lab where this research originates is world-renowned and the work the scientists have done is careful and well-supported. One of these study's authors is John Small, a biologist at Queen's University in Kingston. Here's part of our conversation.
One beautiful thing about lakes is lakes have a time machine at the bottom of the lake. Slowly, year by year, sediment is accumulating at the bottom of the lake. The deeper you go in the mud, the older it is. We can actually take that sediment profile and we can date it, like this is the 1920s, this is 2,000 years ago, whatever, and we can look at the information that's contained in those sediments and reconstruct what's actually happened. The big shift then happened in the 1990s and the transition to the 21st century, and it really is a very sharp transition. That's also the period of much accelerated climate warming around Great Slave Lake. The lake completely shifted in the types of algae, or these primary producers that are so critical to the lake ecosystem. They completely shifted in about 20 years ago. And this shift we've seen before, and it is related to climate warming, particularly less ice cover. And we hear a lot about sea ice changes with climate warming. We hear a lot less about lake ice, except I suppose if you live around a lake, you do care more about lake ice. But lake ice changes are really happening, and if you think of lake ice, it's like a blanket over the lake. So if that blanket is gone, the light is going, it's going to change what can actually grow in the lake. And so we're talking about, this is like passing a threshold. The lake is very different now than it was 30 years ago, and very different than it was 100 years ago. Now, we're talking about little tiny algae, most people say, who cares? They're the base of the food chain. We should care. They're nice to look at as scientists, but it's not something we see. But you need a good microscope to see them. But if they're changing, they're part of the whole ecosystem. So the small animals that eat these algae, they're probably going to change. And this will cascade up the food web all the way to fish, which of course is usually of more importance to local people. Most people don't care about the algae. I think they're quite interesting. But when it goes, most people care about fish. There's important fish species in Great Slave Lake. Some will do better, probably. Some may do worse. It's not clear who the winner will be. That'll take research. I mean, that's probably an answerable question. I'm not a fish person really, but that isn't probably an answerable question. And knowing what's changing at the base of the food chain, I think, is what helps that type of research move along. You say, well, this is changing. Now we should try and find out how that will affect everything else.
A small aircraft went off the runway in Igloolik over the weekend. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada found out about the incident on Sunday evening. It says the Piper PA-31 skidded off the runway while it was doing a pre-flight run-up. That's a procedure that makes sure the engines and other systems in the plane are working. The plane was damaged. 2 people on board were not hurt. The TSB says it hasn't sent investigators to the scene, but it is gathering information about what happened.
Norman Wells is saving energy and money in its arena with new LED lighting.
We want to give the people in the community that use the arena the best experience that they can have. The application process was flawless, and I would encourage other communities to look into this fund with Arctic Energy Alliance.
The Arctic Energy Alliance has free advice and rebates to help you switch and save. Talk to us today.
May I guess your taste?
Not wrong to have ambition.
Don't let fear hold you back.
You don't let them win.
You're gonna see things you'll never forget.
We look so beautiful together.
You are our tomorrow.
When it comes to protecting the world's cuddliest creatures,
We just got a 911 on a bear in a hot tub.
you'll need animal control.
Did he turn the jets on?
Watch all episodes now.
We're ready to go when you need to know.
Good morning.
I'm Heather Hiscox.
We begin with breaking news.
To see from behind us here how big the fire is. You're giving me the hard questions.
Yes, I found Canadians. Start your day with us on CBC Morning Live.
We overspend and overcook, which is disastrous for our wallets and the planet.
That's a lot of waste.
Your job is to discover the mystery dessert.
What is it? What is it?
Raspberries.
Dark chocolate.
We're gonna win.
The UN General Assembly is underway in New York. It's a meeting of leaders from 193 member states that happens annually, a forum for discussion about international issues. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is heading there to take part in talks about sustainability and the crisis in Haiti. Today, the Assembly heard speeches by U.S. President Joe Biden and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Chris Reyes has the highlights.
The 78th session of the UN General Assembly opened today. Leaders from all 193 member states of the UN get to take the podium to address the international community. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres opens the meeting.
Instead of ending the scourge of war, we are seeing a surge of conflicts, coups, and chaos. If every country fulfilled its obligations under the Charter, the right to peace would be guaranteed. When countries break those pledges, they create a world of insecurity for everyone.
U.S. President Joe Biden among the first speakers. His message that the U.S. is committed to the UN and to multilateral institutions, as well as reforming them to meet those 21st century challenges. He once again called for expanding the Security Council to be more inclusive. And on Russia, he said this.
Russia alone bears responsibility for this war. Russia alone has the power to end this war immediately. And it's Russia alone that stands in the way of peace, because Russia's price for peace is Ukraine's capitulation, Ukraine's territory, and Ukraine's children.
President Zelensky, what message would you like to send to leaders?
Perhaps one of the most anticipated appearances today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, and invite him to...
This is his first time to address the General Assembly in person since Russia attacked his country.
Please hear me. Let unity decide everything openly. While Russia is pushing the world to the final war, Ukraine is doing everything to ensure that after Russian aggression, no one in the world will dare to attack any nation.
Tomorrow, Zelensky is scheduled to address the Security Council.
Slava Ukraini.
Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
Canada's overall inflation rate jumped to 4% in August, up from 3.3% from July. It's the second consecutive increase, and it was bigger than expected. The CBC's Nisha Patel takes a look at what's behind the hike.
Carlene Jack keeps a close eye on gas prices. These days, she's really feeling pinched.
If we're doing our truck to fill up, we are definitely looking at close to 200 fill.
She owns a yard care company. Keeping her machines running costs big bucks, and stubborn inflation is taking a toll.
As a business owner, family business, we also get this on a personal side too. So it's kind of like a double hit.
Prices at the pumps climbed almost 5% in August compared to the month before. It comes as Russia and Saudi Arabia cut crude supply, pushing oil prices up nearly 30% since June.
They're going to be high in the coming months.
So don't be surprised if this high inflation is sticky and stays higher.
Canadians are also paying more in rent, as well as steep interest costs on mortgages. And while grocery prices aren't climbing as fast as before, shoppers may not see much change at the checkout.
$41.70. We're going to get some relief in terms of the inflation rate, but not necessarily what it costs you to actually go out and buy food and feed your family.
Inflation has dropped from a peak of 8.1% last year. The economy is slowing, the job market is cooling, but there's still a lot of demand.
Kind of like pushing on a string, right?
With inflation ticking up for the second month in a row, analysts say getting back to the 2% target won't be easy.
When you have, record population growth and then just wage growth filtering into inflation more broadly, those are the last real key pieces that are hard to break.
The Bank of Canada has raised interest rates 10 times over the past year and a half as it tries to rein in inflation. Earlier this month, the central bank chose not to hike rates any further, a pause to assess the impact on the economy. Odds of another interest rate hike have jumped on this latest inflation report. Still, there's lots more economic data the Bank of Canada will have to consider before it makes its decision next month. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
A sacred Indigenous site at a provincial park in eastern Ontario was recently hit by vandals. Now staff with Ontario Parks are investigating and evaluating the damage, and Indigenous leaders are calling on more to be done to keep the site safe. Dan Takama reports.
Centuries of Indigenous history have been painted on Mazenah Rock, the cliffs soaring above water at Bon Echo Provincial Park. But in recent weeks, there's been an unwelcome addition. Names hastily scratched into the stone near the artwork.
It's kind of an attack on our identity, an attack on who we are, and an attack on our history. So it's quite upsetting.
More than 260 Indigenous pictographs cover the rocks behind me. The site is considered sacred. In a statement, Ontario Parks described the vandalism as shameful.
It's a spiritual place. It's a gathering place. Of course, you see all the pictographs there, and the pictographs tell stories. There's teachings on there. There's instructions, directions.
Ontario Parks says the damage was reported on September 2nd. They're now investigating and say they take what happened seriously. They're not the only ones.
I have some four-letter words that run through my mind.
As someone who studies Indigenous relations and a member of the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation, this professor says a site like this can't be replaced.
Because there's very few on Algonquin territory left and through the Anishinaabe nations that hasn't been destroyed by colonialism. This kind of thing is like our Mona Lisa. It are things that, you can't duplicate.
Park staff are assessing the damage and looking into potential repairs, while Indigenous leaders are calling for better protection at the site. Dan Takama, CBC News at Bon Echo Provincial Park.
A big moment coming up for some young hockey players from Nunavut. They'll be suiting up for the Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation Selects in Manitoba this year. The CBC's Jody Ninjioshek has that story.
The 8 players from Nunavut were among 12 from the territory to try out for the Keystone Junior Hockey League team last weekend. Head coach and general manager Gatlin Church says it's rewarding seeing the young men advancing.
I do take a lot of pride and self-pride in the fact that I can help these kids move on and get to the next level. And when they do, I make sure those stories are told.
Church says the players were scouted at the Arctic Winter Games where Team Nunavut won gold this year. Rankin Inlet's Kobe Connolly is in his second year on the team. The 19-year-old forward was the first Nunavut player to join the team. His advice?
Keep pushing and ignore what everyone else has to say, because nobody can tell you what you can or can't do.
Connolly says he's been nominated to be an assistant captain this year. Rankin Inlet's Caden Ittuk is new to the team, says,
I'm just looking forward to doing better in school, trying to better myself as a person, and I just want to grow.
19-year-old Xavier Kubluto from Rankin Inlet said moving south is a culture shock, but he is looking forward to playing.
And I'm looking forward to a great season with a great coach and a great group of guys.
Also on the team is Rankin Inlet's Terrence Pilakupsi, whose uncles are Jordan and the late Terrence Tutu. The Selects are planning an exhibition game in Rankin Inlet this November. The PBCN Selects lost their first game last Friday 7-3 to the Opaskawak Cree Nation. Jody Ninguchel, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Now, a story that's going to take us across the ocean to Western Japan. It was a day of thrill rides and excitement at a festival there. The main draw, huge floats that raced through the city streets. 34 shrine floats took part this month, each one pulled by participants at hair-raising high speeds through city streets. Floats stand about 4 meters tall and weigh about 4,000 kilograms. That's around 9,000 pounds. Cheering crowds lined the streets to watch the hugely popular event. The traditional festival has taken place for the past 300 years. And that's Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, head to cbc.ca/north. Thanks for watching. I'm Leanie Lambrink. Have a good night.
Consider this my resignation.
3 of Toronto's finest, dead on your watch.
There are secrets. I shall soon uncover them.
You're a very clever man.
No, you can't.
No. You'll be needing your rest.
Desperate times call for desperate measures, do they not?
Where are we?
The detective and his wife have gone missing. I don't know where they are.
Help! Help!
What Canadian creature is often a villain in fairy tales? Likes to talk to its family a lot. Hunts in large packs for big animals. And is a close cousin to dogs. If you guessed the wolf, you're right. These mighty hunters are quite shy of people and fill an important role in nature. To learn more about wolves, visit our website at hww.ca.
We overspend and overcook, which is disastrous for our wallets and the planet.
That's a lot of waste.
May I guess your taste?
Not wrong to have ambition.
Don't let fear hold you back.
Your job is to discover the mystery dessert.
What is it? What is it?
Raspberries.
Dark chocolate.
I think I got it. Woo!
You don't let them win.
You're gonna see things you never forget.
They look so beautiful together. You are our tomorrow.
Every week, the issues that matter to Canadians.
These are acts of desperation.
Connecting politics to people.
We will always protect and defend all NATO allies.
Some people have lost everything.
Sundays, join me for Rosemary Barton Live.
The Great Canadian Baking Show is back.
And the winner is...
Alan, no, it's too soon for that.
How about now?
Give me that.
Okay.
Get the news you need without restrictions. Download the free CBC News app